Have a really full agenda. We're just kind of keep, we're going to dive in and keep going while everyone's joining us. So welcome. In terms of a note that I wanted to make, just in case anyone's missed it, Amanda is recording our session this morning. So that's just an FYI to everyone who's participating in this call. In terms of our agenda, we're going to try to spend as much time as we can with our two maritime experts that are joining us this morning, Joshua Berger and Brock Mansfield. So I will be doing a short introduction to E8, since we have quite a few expected participants this morning that are not E8 members. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview of our organization. But then we're going to dive into kind of the big part of the Learning Lab, which is presentations by Joshua and Brock. And they're also going to share information about the organizations that they are a part of. And then at the end, we intend to leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So the best way for me as a moderator and Amanda to see your questions is for you to put them in the chat. And I encourage all of you to upvote the questions so that we can see which ones people would like asked first. So please feel free to use the chat as Brock and Joshua are going through their presentation. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention our incredible sponsors who really help us with our programming in E8. We also have an excellent fellows program. We might have some fellows on our call today from WSU and University of Washington and a couple other universities. So in terms of a brief introduction to E8, we are a nonprofit angel investing network, and our mission is to accelerate the transition to a cleaner and greener future. We were founded in 2006, and since then, we've invested in 160 portfolio companies, and over $64 million have gone into those portfolio companies. We have about 130 members. In terms of some of our activities, we hold monthly member meetings where we typically have about 3 companies that pitch. We offer opportunities for direct investment, member-led, as well as philanthropic funds. We also offer education, like the Learning Lab you're attending today, as well as in-person networking events. And then we have an annual meeting that's hybrid each year. And so with that, I would like to introduce Joshua Berger and Brock Mansfield. So Joshua is the founder, CEO, and president of Washington Maritime Blue. Joshua founded Washington Maritime Blue while serving as Governor Jay Inslee's maritime sector lead for the state of Washington. He was later appointed president and CEO to guide the organization's growth and strengthen its leadership in the global blue economy. Joshua is actively involved in several boards and advisory committees focused on maritime and ocean clean technology, innovation, and ocean literacy. He resides in Seattle with his family. So welcome, Joshua. And then I'd also like to welcome Brock Mansfield. Brock is the founder and managing partner of Meliorate Partners. It's a group of early stage funds investing at the founder stage in climate and sustainability startups. He is deeply involved in the Stanford climate tech ecosystem as a member of the Stanford Climate Ventures team, a mentor for the Tomcat Center for Sustainability, and a finalist judge for the Doris School's SIF Ecopreneurship Grant Program. Brock is also co-founder and partner at the Blue Innovation Fund. So welcome, Brock. So this morning, we'll be starting off with Joshua, who's going to kick us off with a presentation on the state of the blue economy.
So brilliant,
Joshua,
Emily, thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you. Amanda, Karin, and others. This is a great platform to engage, share more, and talk about what makes Seattle and the Pacific Northwest so blue, as well as it is green. So really appreciate the opportunity. Want to leave as much time for questions and engagement as well. I'll just share 20 seconds on my background. By trade, I'm a merchant mariner, worked at sea for many years in the tug and tow industry, and my passion is tall ships and using tall ships as a platform for ocean literacy, environmental education, and workforce training. And I say that mostly to, if any of you go to sea, spend time on the ocean, on vessels, you understand the multiple and diverse and interdependent systems that are affecting us every day, and not only affecting us, but on our vessels, in our communities, and with our teams or with our crew. We're needing to engage at a systems and collaborative level all the time. And those things are sort of what have led to sort of my and our broader community's sort of description and definition and values of the blue economy sort of through this collaborative and systems approach. And that is held quite deeply here in this region. I think something that is really special about this region is certainly our connection to the ocean, the maritime economy, and more, but also the collaborative spirit, not just collaborative spirit, but sort of the functions around collaboration that happen here. And that's what makes this region now such a global force and hub for ocean-based climate solutions in the blue economy. So I'll share some slides. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm sharing the right slides here. Our goal really here today is to, sorry, I had this all sort of primed up and ready to go, and now it is not. Are you folks at the Climate Hub? I'm just going to let me just start again. Apologize for this. I'm not sure what happened to my typically an issue. There we go. All right, found him. So we have something special here in the Pacific Northwest, and that is an organized and collaborative blue economy that's growing rapidly over the last decade. And it's doing that because of the concerted effort around what we call cluster innovation. And so my goal is to sort of give you some of that background, give you some of the context to how that has grown over the last decade, and some of the trends and work and activity that our organization, which is certainly an amazing team of folks who are passionate and organizing, facilitating around the blue economy. But more than that, it's made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of members and partners and interested parties who are engaging around this. So I sort of speak for the organization, but the organization is more than our team of 18. It's the hundreds that are engaged in this work every day. So hopefully that gives sort of the background and starts to lead towards the activity that are happening in these really specific trends and areas of focus. And then, my good friend and good partner, Brock, will dive into some of the details that are aligned to where we're seeing venture activity, venture growth, and scalability across all of this work through an early stage innovation perspective. So many of you might know sort of those various different systems and impacts that have primed us to be a global hub for the blue economy, what the blue economy is, and how that aligns to all of the other activity and expertise that exists in our region, and the intersections of those of multiple different sectors and large sectors that are supporting the clean energy transition. That led to almost a decade ago some real thinking about how it is that we align this now almost $50 billion economic driver in our state across the technology innovation and multiple sectors. And we created through 2018 and 2019 the first comprehensive statewide strategy for the blue economy, aligning where there's expertise in this region, where and how capital can flow, and where it's going to impact and support what we define as the blue economy, which is, thriving maritime and ocean industries in a way that is addressing the climate crisis, supporting healthy ocean and marine ecosystems, and thriving, resilient, and equitable communities. So deeply engaged across that triple bottom line as we define it and as we engage around all of that. What happened was, as we were looking at other regions around the globe that were leading, Norway, Singapore, Portugal, France, aligning public and private interests and capital, first of kind demonstration projects around the world. We said, how are you doing it? How are you getting sort of this cross-sector engagement? And they all had these things called innovation cluster organizations, a formal approach, an independent catalyst between industry, government, research, communities, and capital that drives forward these projects, helps create new markets, understands and develops the talent and workforce and capital of the future. But we needed this independent body that would be the catalyst across those multiple sectors to move that forward and Americanize it, right? Collaboration, the Washington way. This is all something I'm sure many of you on the Zoom call understand and have heard of. It's not just that we want to do collaboration, it's how we do collaboration. How do we formalize it, engage it, and accelerate collaboration for this work? So now to date, the organization and our members were just over 6 years old. We're about 130 members across those multiple sectors that are all engaged deeply in participating in demonstration projects, market initiatives, early stage innovation, workforce development, through these formal collaborative mechanisms that our organization holds and facilitates and continues to support and iterate on. You'll see some of these are some of the largest global OEMs in the world, all the way down to one-person engineering shops, our major research institutions, government partners, community organizations, labor organizations, tribal communities, and organizations across the entire Pacific Northwest and globally. Our focus areas where there's real opportunity, and these are sort of our high-level focus areas, and Brock will dive much deeper into these subsectors and where there's opportunity and where there's growth, are really bucketed in these 5 areas of the blue economy: maritime decarbonization, renewable ocean energy, digital transformation, technology supporting healthy ocean ecosystems, and sustainable fishing and seafood. You can see why this region is leading in each of these different areas just by understanding the incredible nature of the Pacific Northwest. And we do that work through some specific program areas, and I'll talk a bit about how they come together. And that's important because not only are we supporting large market initiatives and demonstration projects, startups, and workforce pathways for the most underrepresented communities and being a knowledge hub, we're doing it in a way that is all sort of connected back across those 5 areas of focus. So if you imagine, large market initiatives of our members, some of the leaders, investors, thinkers, and innovators in maritime decarbonization and sustainable maritime fuels, our teams are helping define those markets, understanding where we need to do deep analysis and studies, generating first of kind demonstration projects. We're feeding that with early stage innovation. Not only are we feeding those markets, but we're also getting access to those markets and those leaders in order to support, guide, mentor the startups as they come through our programs. We're understanding where the workforce of the future needs to be, and we're supporting those employers to create more accessible pathways. And we're the connector between all of those. All of that activity leads towards this vision of this region, the Pacific Northwest, being a global hub for ocean-based climate solutions in the blue economy. Like I said, Brock will dive much more into the details, but I wanted to share sort of the types of activities that are happening in each of these sectors as those sectors are growing. The challenges are growing, as well as the commensurate opportunities and all that work. So around maritime decarbonization here in the region, we are leading a collaborative of folks trying to ensure that we can accelerate both the production, use, and availability of sustainable maritime fuels. If you know sort of the pathway towards sustainable aviation fuels, maritime is much more complicated. It's not, we've got 5 to 8 different vessel types. We have lots of different use cases. The industry is still sort of deciding on what the best pathway is, likely to a multi-fuel future for maritime decarbonization. We need to deeply understand what that complex system, and we bring together all of those stakeholders in order for us to help define that and start to demonstrate projects and availability within those fuels. And all this is connected to larger initiatives around the global green corridors and the Northwest Hydrogen Hub that's developing. So our team facilitates those collaboratives and initiatives, and then does studies and projects alongside where those leaders are showing us where the best opportunities are. And then, of course, we're starting startups at all different stages and all different technology types that are supporting that eventual work, vision, and opportunity across decarbonization in maritime across the region. Healthy oceans we think of in lots of different ways. Where we're most organized is around the technology to support a particular challenge in this region, which is the endangered southern resident killer whales. And so coming out of the Governor Inslee's Orca task force a number of years ago, we decided we needed to figure out ways in which we can reduce the acoustic impacts. And so not only are we running voluntary slowdown measures and doing real-time reporting, we're developing the technology to assist that, right? So how do we have real-time awareness of where the whales are and report that to commercial mariners? How are we developing the technologies that are going to reduce the acoustic signatures and emissions of those vessels? And that's where we come in and support startups that are supporting those initiatives. Sustainable fishing and seafood across the many opportunities there. We're diving in right now, certainly on vessel decarbonization, but we're recently stood up a collaborative of the 4, shortly 5 seaweed farmers across this region, and find ways for them to collaborate, particularly on processing capabilities, understand what the best markets are for these small scale farmers, develop the appropriate processing technology, not just the technologies, but what are the collaborative decision-making methods, cooperatives, institutes that's going to be able for them to collaborate in this growing market from a small scale farmer perspective. And across these areas, we're supporting all from net recycling to seaweed snacks to digital solutions for circulating aquaculture. The digital transformation is very interesting and very exciting across maritime and oceans. Everything from port and terminal logistics to ocean data collection. And as you all know, and of course, extreme trends in AI, but also camera vision and reporting back across those ecosystems. We have something that no place else in the world has. In the last 2 years, we have built what's called the Tacoma Blue Edge Network. It is a shared high-speed enterprise scale network with edge compute capability that is built and shared over multiple port operators and maritime manufacturers down in Tacoma on the Tacoma Tide Flats. So we have committed operators that now have access to high-speed connectivity that they never had before. In exchange, they are open for startups and innovators to come and demonstrate technologies in their facilities. Whether they're trying to get, frontline workers access to manufacturing plans or do real-time reporting of water quality in the Thea Foss or terminal operations equipment. Not only now do they have the infrastructure to do that, but they're helping to support early stage innovation across the whole region. There are other 5G networks and ports around the world. None of them have the ability or the distinct goal of supporting new technology and demonstration, or work collaboratively across an entire geographic region where we can have collaborative solutions. Renewable ocean energy takes shape in lots of different ways, everything from offshore wind to tidal and wave energy. This region is really a global leader in research and technology from wave to wind. And I'm sure many of you are following the offshore wind story across the country, across the globe, and across the region. Our role is to understand what the supply chain opportunities are across the west coast of the United States with floating offshore wind. This work is agnostic to where blades spin, and there's lots of important work that needs to be done to understand the impacts and viability to communities and the environment of floating offshore wind, certainly off the coast of Washington State. But we do know is that this is a potential. We'll see what the next few years lead for us, but has had the potential of a trillion-dollar industry growing based off of and built upon a thriving maritime operations and manufacturing capabilities. And so Washington State has a real significant opportunity to lead. And so our role is to bring together all of the interested parties to understand what that supply chain can look like, how we build on existing infrastructure, port capabilities, and maritime operations across the west coast of the United States. And so we're right now engaged in a comprehensive supply chain study, workforce development, and community impact study for that supply chain to be developed. And then we're working on all sorts of other interesting projects across wave and tidal in particular, and many startups to support that industry. Understanding how the blue economy is accessible and thriving for all is critical, particularly across the workforce system. And so we're supporting all sorts of collaboratives, initiatives, internship programming to ensure that we are not a single sort of a large youth serving organization, but our role is to demonstrate how you can accessibly connect communities, the most disadvantaged and underrepresented communities, into opportunities in the blue economy. So we have deep growing relationships with communities and community-based organizations, and then certainly with our employers. We connect and train and support those employers and training institutions on how to create more accessible pathways across that industry and across community engagement. And of course, there are all sorts of interesting technologies that can support us along the way. And so we have found and supported many of those along the way as well. I'll finish up with how we manifest this, both sort of literally and figuratively, by being this global innovation hub. We are supporting delegations from around the globe and supporting business development, and then creating space for folks to work together and collaborate and grow. We're currently operating out of the Blue Hub at Fisherman's Terminal, where we have events and convening space. We lease space out to some of our members, host collaborative engagements. But we are right now in the middle, actually just yesterday, we moved the building back into place and rebuilding the 1914 ship supply building at Fisherman's Terminal to be the new Maritime Innovation Center, a global hub where this activity will continue to grow and thrive. In partnership with the port and the state of Washington, we're renovating this building to the highest green building standards. It will be actually the first renovated commercial living building in the world. And Maritime Blue will be the operator tenant of the building. We're hoping to be able to move in by June 2026. But all this leads to Seattle and the Pacific Northwest being one of those global hubs now. There were years ago where we had to travel to Rotterdam for Seattle startups to get support in the blue economy. Now we have startups from around the globe coming to Seattle and getting access to this incredible cluster and expertise that exists here. And we do that with the most incredible, diverse, and passionate team that I have the privilege of working aside every day. I never sort of want to miss this slide when we're talking about the type of activity that's happening here. Try to move through that quite quick. It's comprehensive, it's large, it's systems engagement, it's change management every single day. But we have gone from the seeds of the blue economy to now a global innovation hub. And I'd love to turn it over to my friend Brock to dive into some of the details and how, from a venture and investor perspective, we're seeing growth happen.
Thank you so
So
much,
Brock, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joshua. So
fantastic. And Romilly, just a quick time check. How
I think we're doing well. So you have 20 minutes.
Perfect. I probably won't need all of that, or hopefully I won't, but we'll see. And then we can dive into some Q&A at the end of this. So let me go in here and share, and we will get going here. Everybody see that? Are we good? Excellent. Well, thanks, Joshua, and thanks, E8. I actually really want to start my remarks off with a big thank you to E8. I'm a longtime Seattle resident. I now split my time between Palo Alto and Seattle, but I remember when E8 was just getting started, and I have a number of friends that are in the organization. A number of people have invested in portfolio of companies of ours over the years, and I just think watching E8's story and its growth and the impact that it has. I'm just thrilled you guys are in the ecosystem, and I'm really impressed with the job you've done. So anybody who's on here as a member, thank you for all that you're doing. For anybody who's on thinking about becoming a member, you should. They're a great organization, and thank you for all that you do. So I'm going to focus then maybe one layer deeper, and this is going to be a little bit of a high level overview, and I'll start that part of things by saying, my contact information is going to be at the end of this, or you can find it multiple different ways. Happy to talk to people about anything more in depth after this, about specific sectors or opportunities or deals themselves. But for today, we're just going to try and give you an overview of actually what we look at. And the preface for that is the way we are set up and the way we think about things at Ameliorate at the higher level and Blue Innovation Fund in this specific case is we think about the whole world as a series of sector maps. And so Joshua sort of touched on the high level of the sectors themselves and what is there. What we think about is, okay, within each of those sectors, like what is actually going on? What's the TAM? What's the CAGR? Where's the white space? What's going on? So what we're going to touch on today is sort of some of the areas that we've identified that we're tracking with our sector map process. Again, it'll be high level, but I'm happy to go into more detail afterwards. Joshua talked about some of these things, so I'll go through these slides really quickly. Broadly speaking, maritime, the blue economy is a $3 trillion industry overall, growing, continuing to grow, expected to double as some people have projected. But there's a bigger thing that we think is happening within that, which is the whole industry across those 5 sectors that Joshua talked about. We're seeing new white spaces pop up because of transition. Joshua talked about fuels. Like, this transition is happening. I mean, some of you may know that Maersk just ordered 10 methanol ships, and these things are happening. With that is going to come literally trillions of dollars of having to remake parts of the infrastructure and also parts of the services industries that surround these. And we think that's a really interesting opportunity in just maritime industry alone. You've then got the whole issue for anybody that's following aquaculture. You'll know that this was the first year that aquaculture actually outsold wild harvest on a global basis. So, how are we going to feel? Wild harvest is, relatively speaking, been flat. Aquaculture is, and we're feeding more and more people. That is coming from aquaculture. And so the future of that, both aquaculture, mariculture, and others. And then I'm sure all of you are aware of just all the issues that we're having with the oceans relative, whether it be the carbon sink limitations that we're running into, whether it be plastics, whether it be pollution. There's a whole variety of issues. And each one of those areas, in our opinion, based on our research, is creating these trillion-dollar white spaces that are really, really interesting to contemplate. So these are the 5 sectors that Joshua went through. He talked about it when he's talking, they're looking at it and saying, hey, these are interesting growth areas, but they're also really looking at the industry level. We're looking out and saying, what is this transition going to look like, and what are these dollars like? So rather than a $3 trillion industry, we actually see this as more like a $6 trillion opportunity across these 5 sectors. And then with each of these, and you saw this on the previous slides as well, under each of these sort of broad subsectors that we've identified that we think have venture scale opportunity in that. And I will take a second just to separate those two things. I come from the venture background. All of our funds are venture scale. We are aiming for venture scale returns. There's a number of opportunities for those of you who are impact investors or think about social investing as well. There's a number of opportunities within these that are completely separate from what we're going to talk about. And I think Maritime Blue does a particularly good job of identifying and separating those. They actually have multiple programs, an accelerator for venture scale, incubators for things that are either too early for prime time or are never going to be venture scale, but are important to the ecosystem, as well as all the social programs that they do. So I'll just throw that out for those of you whose interests span that entire spectrum. There's all sorts of opportunities beyond just what I'm going to talk about here today. And the cool thing that we're seeing is that it's happening. And if I were in a room, because I give this presentation a few different times, I always ask people to raise their hands. Like, how many people have heard of Kerecis? You don't have to raise your hand here, but most people have not heard about this, and it's actually the biggest exit in the blue economy in recent memory. Were purchased for $1.3 billion. It's an Icelandic company that developed a process for turning cod skin into a wound care treatment. So they came out of Iceland, and really interestingly, Iceland's goal at the time was to figure out how can we catch the same or less amount of fish but increase the revenues, because like 1/3 of their GDP is fisheries. And so they started investing in different types of innovations that they thought could increase the value per pound of every fish caught, allowing them to catch less fish but actually grow their revenues. And this was one of the outcomes of that, and a really big win that a lot of people don't know about that's out there. There's a second one called Project 44 here, which is backed by a number of industry players in the logistics space. They just recently completed a $2.7 billion post-money round. They're global now. Really, really amazing new platform within the port logistics, international logistics sectors. And then there's two others, and I'm pleased to say that in our portfolio, we've found some as well. I'm not able to tell you the exact numbers of what these are, but I will say that we've had two recent 9-figure rounds for two companies in our portfolio. Blue Nalu, some of you may know, or you may be in wild type or finless in the alternative protein space, but they continue to grow with a particular focus on Asia. And then for all you local folks here, Tidal Vision out of Bellingham has become one of the real breakaway wins here. We were first checked in one of our portfolios years ago, and they've now become a major player in turning crab and shrimp shell waste into, they've developed a non-toxic process for turning that into a product called chitosan, which for those of you who are not familiar with chitosan, can be used in a whole wide variety of things, but primarily Tidal Vision is selling it into the wastewater market as a bindery ingredient, and they're selling it as a replacement for synthetic nitrogen in food and ag, and they're growing like a weed. So I think hopefully very soon to be one of the big local success stories in this particular area. I'm not going to jump into I'm going to go through these quicker than we should. Again, happy to do deep dives later for anybody that wants to and go into this. But I'm going to talk about each of these sectors and just talk about some of the things that we see and some of the areas that we're focused on, and then give you an example of a deal that we think is interesting in a given space. Starting with maritime decarbonization. So some things that just some high level facts that we find, there'll be each of these slides will have one of those, but first of all, just a lot of people don't really, they think about, we have to do something about aviation emissions and sustainable aviation fuels and things like this. The reality is that shipping emissions dwarfs that. It's actually 3% of global CO2 emissions. And in large part because it says here 95% of water-based transport is fossil fuel. So if you think about all the ferries and all the boats and all the pleasure boats and everything is fossil fuel based right now. And so when you talk about these large scale transitions that are happening, think about all the things that have to change to actually move that number from 95% down to a much lower number. There we go. And here's these categories, right? So, and then within each of these sort of categories, we talked at the high level, there are subcategories within these. So you start thinking about like, how are these boats going to be moved? What kind of fuel will be used? What's the charging infrastructure for them? What do the actual boats look like? And are we have to redesign hulls and things like that as we go through this? And then for those ones that remain fossil fuel based, what are we doing with the carbon and how's that being captured? And then what are we doing with those products? One company in particular, again, a Northwest company that we like to promote that came through Maritime Blue is called Photon Marine. Some of you may know them in the large horsepower market. They're actually going out to raise here again, but are making great progress in the large horsepower electric engine market, which we think is a particularly, so think of all of the 100 horse and up engines that are run by Coast Guard or run by tour groups and all these things. That entire engine ecosystem is being remade right now, and Photon's really at the forefront of that. In terms of ocean energy, same thing, huge potential for those of you who are very focused on the environmental side of this, from a greenhouse gas reduction standpoint and carbon dioxide standpoint, huge. But again, some of these big facts that if we transition, this is the way we think of things, like what could be, if we were able to transition, like literally ocean wind alone could power the entire US if we can convince everybody that we should have these out in the oceans. And I would say for anybody, we were just in Amsterdam back earlier, end of last year, and for anybody that's flown in there and flown over their wind farms that are out there and seeing how much power that is generating and what it's doing, the templates are there, the analogs are there, and lots of places around the world are adopting this. Hopefully, the United States continues to do the same as it goes forward. But as you think about that particular ecosystem, and you guys are probably very well versed in all these areas, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular slide. But I will point out one thing that we've seen that we think is really, really interesting in this space, and that is the services side. And just one example, I'll bring up Blumen Systems, which is a San Francisco-based startup that is becoming a leader in the permitting space, renewables permitting space. You have this issue of having, whether it be federal, whether it be state, whether it be county, whether it be city-based codes for permitting that you need to navigate. And there's a new white space got created there where people said, boy, how can we make this a lot simpler and a lot faster? And companies like Blumen Systems jumped in with these new platforms that not only help, basically you can now take anywhere, any GPS coordinate and say, what are the permitting requirements for this place? And then from there say, great, and then it will walk you through the actual submission process of what documents you need to do. And then after you submit and get approval for your permitting, it'll help you manage the permitting process and renewals going forward. And so these are the kind of like little pocket white spaces that are actually, billion or multi-billion-dollar opportunities that sit within these larger areas. In the ocean's ecosystems, you guys know about this. One area that I'm though particularly passionate about is the pollution side of things. And between the nitrogen, phosphorus, ammonia, and plastics issues alone, we think there's tremendous opportunity here. And it's an area that we're doing a deep dive into right now. So again, these big areas that we heard about earlier, coastal resilience, MCDR, MRV, plastics, they all have these subsectors where we found interesting opportunities. And the two companies that I would call out, one on the coastal resilience side of things, and certainly we've seen a lot of examples of this where things need to be rebuilt. And the big question is, how are they going to be rebuilt? What are they going to be rebuilt with? Are they going to use old systems and old rebar and concrete and the things that have been used in the past? Or are we going to use different types of whether materials or the same materials but made in a different way? And one company we're big fans of, and some of you may have heard of, is called Brimstone, which came up with a process for making carbon negative Portland cement. So, making cement is one of the most energy intensive processes you can imagine. They have come up with an entirely new process for making this type of cement that can be used for all these new projects that are going up. Recently got, I think, raised a $50 million round and then got a $190 million grant from the government to continue building out their facilities. So a company that we think is right on the cusp of really doing some great things. And I throw up the Stanford logo because that's where I'm involved a lot. And I work with a lot of the labs down there. And there is a huge amount of focus on wastewater. And if there's anybody from the other universities here, we would love to collaborate on this. But for example, California is in the process of changing their regulations for wastewater, and they are doing a major change to the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus they're going to allow to flow into just the Bay Area, for example, but really any wastewater facility. And to give you a sense of scale, there are 36 wastewater treatment facilities in the greater Bay Area, and the estimated cost to comply and change out on a CapEx basis these new regulations that are expected to come down in 2025 is $10 billion. So that's just the Bay Area alone, let alone the rest of the country as they look at this. And so a whole slew of labs now are starting to really get into, okay, how can we reduce that number by coming up with new types of filtration technologies that allow us to better capture nitrogen and phosphorus and ammonia? And then a whole secondary question is, well, once we've captured it, what do we do with it? And there's a whole nother group of people that are working on ways to say, what kind of products can we turn this into of value? So two areas that we think are really, really interesting within the healthy ocean ecosystems. On sustainable fisheries, to me, the single biggest number that really jumped out at me this year was that transition to where aquaculture is now larger than wild harvest. And if you look at the numbers, we work pretty closely with like UW Fisheries Department and others. For the most part, wild harvest fisheries are flat. They're not really growing, and we can do a certain amount to change that as far as ecosystem improvement. But the reality is, if the world's population keeps growing, aquaculture is going to be a huge driver of that. So when we look at space, aquaculture is right at the top. We work with people all around the world in that space. Mariculture is an interesting one. We really like the space broadly because we'd like to see it happen. There's a lot of challenges still to be figured out, and just in terms of the unit economics, distribution, how do you dry it, what do you use it for, and then most importantly, our experience has been you have to be better, cheaper, faster to get any venture traction with any of these things that we're looking at. And so, if you're trying to create a product that can be used in for example plastics replacement, you've got to not only be able to make it, but you have to be able to make it to compete against the petroleum-based products that are already being used, and they have to work on all the existing equipment. No one's going to replace their equipment and do that as well. So on the aquaculture space, one I'll just point out, if you haven't heard of this, it's backed by a group called Livorna, is Blue Gen, and I think this is one of the interesting things happening in aquaculture right now on a global basis, is that people are starting to realize that it's really important to find a high value fish that is disease resistant and grows well in captivity. So Livorna backed this company Blue Gen, which we're seeing get great traction, doing a variation of a sole-based product that is very, very popular over in Asian markets. A second thing I'll say, which is very early, but we're watching closely. I think everybody probably on this call is aware that open net, pen-based aquaculture has basically been outlawed along the entire West Coast now, and so that's moving people to look on shore. Still a really tricky area, but if someone can figure out particularly the disease issues around that, so we don't have catastrophic wipeouts in aquaculture, there is a huge white space there to be developed. And last is digital transformation. Joshua talked about this a little bit as well. It's, again, as this industry changes, we're seeing them move from analog to digital. It's for the most part been a very old school industry across these things, but we're seeing it more and more go that direction as it goes forward. I'm sure you guys are looking at AI deals. We are as well. We think that's really, really interesting. I would say one that we would call out, one company would be Jibe, which was a company that came through Maritime Blue, was able to benefit from that 5G project that Joshua talked about and test out their technology, which allows essentially people to move from sticky notes, Excel sheets, and pads of paper to an entire digital platform, either phone or pad based, for port operations. And it really, so for frontline workers looking to digitize, they were able to test everything and now rolling that out, and we have high hopes for that company as well. So that's sort of the dive. Again, happy to go deeper into any of those subsectors as we're diving into each of them on a regular basis. I'm just going to give you a quick 2-minute overview about what Blue Innovation Fund does, and then we can go to Q&A. Blue Innovation Fund, many of you know Jean-Noel Poirier is an E8 member. We've been friends for years and are both equally committed to putting this fund together, focused on the blue economy. And what we think makes us really unique, and the way we think about this at a very fundamental level, is our partners. So one partner is Maritime Blue. Joshua talked all about them. The other one is Plug and Play, which many of you may know, which is the largest global innovation platform in the world. And the reason we think those are so important in this sector is that this sector is a the broad blue economy is a very tricky sector. We are not going to see the Tesla of container ships come through here. There's just too many moving parts and it's too complex. And so in this industry, you absolutely have to work from the beginning with corporate and regulatory partners if you're trying to affect change or put new things in. So we think, between the combination of Maritime Blue's expertise in putting together these test projects and using its cluster to build things with a team of people in this collaborative way, combined with Plug and Play giving us access to all of their corporate partners who are thinking about their Scope 3 emissions, which, by the way, are largely driven by what's happening in the maritime industry, because all their stuff goes around the world by boat. So it gives us this great ability from the very get-go to engage with the right partners. And the way that we think about it is we start with, and this is one of the things we really love about this strategy, is that we're able to talk to all these organizations before we even pull the trigger on an investment to see if they're at all interested. And if there is interest, we can run this through these programs like the 5G program that Joshua talked about, to test things out and get pilots for our companies before we make the investment. So these things are all in place. At that point, we invest, help them get through the path to pilot and pilot phase, and then move them up into scale up and beyond, oftentimes with joint ventures and investing from corporate partners. So it's a very unique strategy, but one that we think is the right way to approach this, and that's what we do. And then we combine that with having this large global network. We've been investing in this sector for a long time, and we know all the venture funds and the VCs that are out there. I would also throw out that if anybody here is investing in these spaces, we are more than happy to collaborate with you and help with introductions. If you don't know these funds and these people, we want to see more innovation in this space, and we're happy to help let our network help you as well as you go forward. So last slide that I have is just as far as, this, we're trying to transform the blue economy, trying to reimagine it and think about what it can be. Some things you might consider: one, if this is at all interesting to you and Joshua's presentation as well, join the Maritime Blue community. Fantastic group of people dedicated to this, very collaborative, and willing to help anybody who's interested in putting their shoulder to the wheel here. And if you do that, and you have a specific expertise that's relevant, I think we now have 180 sector members across all those sectors that we talked about. So people with specific expertise that can advise our companies and our founders early to help them get to the best place possible. If you're a corporate partner on this call, you saw the corporate relationships that we have. This is our bread and butter. Really, the core of what we do is build these relationships around innovation. We'd be happy to talk to you. And last is, we're heading toward our first close right now, and always are welcoming any values aligned LPs that are interested in talking to us about being part of what we're building. So that's it. Contact information for John Noel and myself is there. We're happy to talk with you anytime about any of these sectors or anything we talked about today.
Great. Thank you, Brock, for such a detailed, in-depth presentation. You covered a lot of material in 20 minutes. I'm impressed. You and Joshua are fast talkers. So thanks for all the great information. I'd like to take a few questions. I'm going to combine a couple questions because I feel like people are really interested in the decarbonization slide that you were talking about. So you mentioned new technologies for decarbonizing maritime. So the question is, could you highlight a few most promising? And then I'd like to also combine that with another question. That is, can you talk a little bit about the tension between raising standards for decarbonizing fleets and making the technology affordable and accessible and more commonplace in the maritime industry?
I can take a first stab there.
Sure.
Appreciate both of those for sure. Brock can jump in on some of the interesting technologies as well. There are some core technology right now and sort of developing what will be the series of fuels of the future when we talk about decarbonization from a fuel perspective. And a significant amount of new technology that's being developed, the ever-growing battery technology, as it grows and shapes, that's going to change the face of electrification. Electrification is appropriate for maritime decarbonization at certain levels. This is what's sort of complex about maritime. So many different use cases, vessel types, routes, and then it's, so much of it, especially global shipping, is tied to global infrastructure. And how do you ensure you're going to have the same fuel when you get to Singapore or Busan, Korea, when you pull up to Husky Terminal in Tacoma? So there's a significant amount of coordination that needs to happen there. On the technology side, the things I'm really interested in are technologies that are happening both, on board the vessels, but also technology that's going to support infrastructure development. And that can be as much as sort of understanding the infrastructure ecosystem, as well as it is dockside or pier side technology that's, new technology that's going to transfer fuels in new ways, fuels that we are not used to dealing with. The insights into how we do that in new ways and new and safe ways. Lots of interesting, as Brock calls them, white spaces across fueling and maritime decarbonization. It is so incredibly broad. There was another question, another example. So very early, has huge interesting potential. Many of you probably know OCO-Chem, using formic acid, sort of doing a one-time carbon capture circular process to create formic acid as a high density liquid hydrogen carrier that can be mobile. that you can sort of develop at scale and then be mobile. We're going to be doing the first demonstration of that technology at the Port of Tacoma with a Tacoma-based terminal. That has real interesting inputs, because if you can store hydrogen at extreme high density in a really safe and easy transportable methodology, and then turn it into energy, whether it's fuel cell or liquid or gas, sort of as needed, and then continually and circularly develop it, that has really interesting implications. So it's very much at the early stages. I think we're looking to get as much like a 250 kilowatts or something like that, at least at this first stage, to support some refrigerated containers in a terminal, just to be able to demonstrate it is really interesting. The tension there, I think that the deal that I know, this is the hard part about maritime. This is an incredibly capital intensive, low margin industry that is going to be really challenging to make technology decisions on vessels that are being constructed, equipment that's being put in vessels now that will be in place at 2030 and 2050 and maybe even beyond. So how do you make these decisions on technology that is still not affordable, yet quick raising standards? I think it's a great question. That is the question of the industry that is trying to challenge. I have sort of my personal beliefs of where those sort of dollars come down to pay down the risk of those technologies, as well as incentivize continued use that will then more naturally bring the markets down. But that's the question of the globe right now for maritime decarbonization. Adil, I absolutely agree with you.
I don't know if you
I
want
know,
to
Brock, if there's other
I don't know how many
decarb stuff
questions there are,
that's super.
so I don't know if you
Yeah.
want a quick answer or quick thoughts or move on. Let me know.
I'd like to, since we only have a few minutes for questions, I'd like to ask another question, which is a great question on the risk return profile for investors in the blue economy. It tends to be higher due to capitalization needed, time to market, et cetera. So how should investors think about the risks of investing in marine-based industries?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So a couple thoughts. So first of all, I think the most important thing about investing in the blue economy is that you break down everything into its component parts. It's not like, hey, I'm going to invest in the blue economy and everything's there. There are certainly sectors, and Joshua referred to this in his last comments and in his last answer, right? There are certain parts of this where it is so entrenched and so heavily CapEx intensive, there is no venture play there. And I've seen a lot of investors in what I'll call sort of blue economy 1.0 investing kind of come rushing in and put dollars like across the entire area without thinking about that. So not every deal in the blue economy is suited for venture. And it's, again, I would say is one of the things we love about working with Maritime Blue is because they have these other programs, it allows us to avoid that adverse selection, because we can take those and go, this is super important and has to happen, but it's not venture. So let's move that over. The second thing I would say is another way to, and I'll just backtrack a little bit with the previous question as well. I think you have to think about this space in terms of replace, transition, or mitigate. Those are three big buckets, and they're very different. And when you look at every technology here, you have to think about, is there an opportunity to replace something? And that is truly like a greenfield opportunity. Are we transitioning something, and is there a venture scale opportunity there? And then mitigate, which is, and I think of that in terms of like container ships. Like, we are not going to see electrified, global container ships anytime soon, but we can really innovate with onboard carbon capture systems that allow us to essentially decarbonize, in many ways, the transportation leg of those ships, not putting aside the construction leg, but the transportation leg. And then in the transition, we're seeing in the smaller boats, though, a whole bunch of new hull designs and material uses like carbon fiber, and electrification of up to like 32, 40-person ferries around the world that we think is a whole nother area of opportunity, but that's in more the transition. And then you have replace, where we see more like electrified pleasure boats, outboard engines and things like that, which are very near-term opportunities. So you have to sort of figure out in that grid where the right place to invest is. for
Great.
I
venture.
just want to highlight what Brock said is that it seems really critical. I think this answers a number of the different questions. And the thing that we're working, Brock and I, and with a number of our global partners through a group we're engaged in called the Thousand Ocean Startup Coalition. It's a group of investors, accelerators, incubators, and early stage supporters around this space globally, is, to Brock's point, really understanding what is venture scale and what is not, and what are the right mechanisms to invest and accelerate in where you are on that scale.
Yeah.
Right? We need to invest, we need to grow. Venture is going to be right for a certain percentage of it. Other investment mechanisms are going to be right, everything from non-dilutive to appropriate loan capital, debt, et cetera. And we have to figure that out. And, Brock and I and a number of others with our global partners are working really hard to figure that out, and then understand what are the appropriate mechanisms at the right scale. That's what help leads us. And then there's the right risk profile for everybody within that and where their interest is.
And just to put two quick numbers on that, first round investors in Carasis sat on about a 200x return. Some of the ones that we mentioned in our portfolio are right now between sitting carrying value. They still have to get liquid, but are at 70 to 80x. So, there's absolutely venture scale risk return opportunity here. You just have to be really careful and thoughtful about it.
Great. Well, I feel like in terms of the timing, we're coming to the top of the hour. I'd hope to fit in another question, but I feel like we're very, very close to the end of 10 a.m. And I wanted to make sure I had time to say thank you again, Joshua and Brock. This has been very informative. I really appreciate the time that you put into it. And I also appreciate all those who joined us today. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you reach out to either myself at E8 or director at e8angels.com, or Joshua or Brock, that you reach out to us and let us know your questions or how you can get engaged. And I also appreciated the fact that you guys shared some ways that people can advocate, get engaged, because I think that's really important as we all look at how we can at the future of the blue economy and how we can really have impact long term.
Fantastic.
So,
Emily, thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank
Great
you for having us.
opportunity. And I will do that plug one more time, is that we have formal mentorship programs and lots of engagement opportunities, both within Maritime Blue and Blue Innovation Fund. So please do reach out.
great. Thank you.